Horrible story.
Mohammed, you've lived through so much in Gaza, and you have such a great spirit. Is your spirit always that way? Has it always been that way? Or what goes on inside of you that you can end up having the spirit that you do? What have you gone through to become that way?
Who come?
See, everybody is feeling so empathetic with you right now. Thank God it's not me.
Whatever it takes, right?
Other than that.
For me, to be honest with you, is empathy. It represents for me is like the most powerful communication skill that you can communicate with people honestly. And for me, empathy is this feeling when you give people this feeling of secure, so they can talk to you freely and they can share with you your opinions and their feelings. So this for me is the empathy. And where is empathy, there is a productive discussion. So if people they are empathetic to each other, so they can be honest.
Louder, please. Can't hear you.
If people they are empathetic with each other, I think there is a productive discussion. So people they can talk freely and honestly, and they can solve any problem without like any fighting or something like that. I just the greatest situation that I felt empathy last year when we had a wonderful event in San Francisco with Elad and Ilana, and Elad he came to us and he said he felt this sense of secure and that we were empathetic to him. He's a former Israeli soldier, and he came to us and he said, can I say that I was a former Israeli soldier, and can I say that I killed some Palestinian people during my duty? No one can say that if he didn't feel that we were empathetic to him. It was difficult on me to accept this fact, but I felt empathetic to him. And I told him, I'm not only forgiving you, I'm also inviting you to visit me in my home back home. He did something wrong, but now he acknowledging, and he felt painful, and he regret what he did, but at the same time he wanna fix it. If you think realistically, people they are fighting because, especially in Palestine, in Gaza, people they are fighting because they want on the other side listen to them. They didn't have the chance that the other one listened to them. I give you an example. BLO, they fought for many years. When they give them the chance, they give them a Nobel Prize for peace. They saw how gentle, how wonderful people they were. So people they are fighting to have the chance to talk and to listen, to tell what they have. So we are in America now. I got here and I have this opportunity that people providing me, they are empathetic to me, and they give me this feeling of secure. So I'm empathetic to them. So I have to take advantage of this moment, of this situation, telling them what's going on, and together, so they can listen to me, they're empathetic to me. And maybe some people they are wondering, so if they are empathetic to you, how they can help people back home. Maybe they cannot help them immediately now, but if they are empathetic to me and my people, they're gonna tell the other people what's going on, and the other people they're gonna be empathetic to this story, and maybe after a long time, maybe we can change it. As I said, as a citizen now, as a student, I don't have an option. I do have two options: to talk and change, otherwise to go back and fight. So I'm trying this one. I'm talking now, and I think this is the most efficient way that we are making people empathetic, not to us as a human, empathetic to us not as a human, but empathetic to us, to our story, empathetic to our story, to be empathetic, because if they are empathetic to us, to our story, they're gonna change the situation. So for me, empathy is a productive discussion.
I agree.
Education, the bottom line.
I actually have a question about that.
Go ahead, huh?
Like, we're talking a lot about empathy,
Speak up.
that empathy needs more knowledge, needs more education before it can happen. But like, could a blind person be empathetic to someone going through a racial problem? This is like, they're from two completely different worlds, because this blind person, what is this person's views on race and being blind? So
It's interesting.
sometimes I feel that really what gets us is not what we don't know, but what we think we know for sure. And I don't know, it just seems always like an uphill struggle when we think we need more education, we need to find out more and more and more and more about all the different people before we can be empathetic. But I don't know, maybe there's something else.
Have you had an experience where you were blind to another person and then you somehow became more empathetic?
I don't know. All I know for myself is that in general it goes like, I have a bunch of frameworks in my mind, and that these things are deserving of empathy because they go along with what I think is justice. And when I find out about your story and you fit in my framework, now I can feel empathy towards you. But maybe the thing is, maybe if I just dissolve some of those frameworks more, then empathy just naturally starts happening more and more. And it doesn't matter even what your story is. Do I need you to confess in front of me for many hours for me to feel empathy? If I'm blind and you're telling me a racial injustice, can I still somehow feel empathy for you just naturally, even though I have no idea what you're talking about? I don't know. That's the question, though.
Yeah, Judy brought up the notion that she grew up maybe too empathetic or always empathetic, and I'm thinking of like an anthropological perspective, which is the notion that human beings try to make meaning and they behave rationally in some system of meaning making. And if you go with the assumption that people are trying to make sense of things and they're behaving rationally within some system, a blind person can be empathetic about race. To me, it's just this underlying notion that human beings are trying to get by and do the right thing in some way. That was a bad answer or a bad response or thought.
I think,
Well, it's about stories. So why couldn't you tell a story to a blind person? Why couldn't they understand it? They would understand it. They would be able to visualize it. And then learn. Because, I hear stories from communities and from people's childhood. I didn't grow up with these people. I don't have to have grown up with them to really get it. And I think that's really what we're trying to do here, is to learn somebody else's story. For my personal empathetic story that I'm currently working on, I have an apartment building next to a house that I just bought in Oakland, and it's in a neighborhood that is a challenging neighborhood, slightly. I don't walk around by myself at night a lot, but I do sometimes. But there's this one apartment upstairs, and it has 3 generations living in it. Mom and dad, they have teenagers, and one of the teenagers is a mother. And so I hear yelling coming out of the house, and now there's graffiti on the front of that building because there's another tenant who has trouble with that apartment. And what I recently learned was that the mother has some illness.
that's right.
Has an illness of some sort. And I don't know specifically what it is. But the first thing that leapt out of my heart was, I need to bring some food over there. But I don't know these people yet. I actually don't even know how to knock on their door because they're behind a fence and it's a little complicated. But every time I see somebody who comes from out of the gate, I just walk out my front door. Sometimes I have my broom and my dustpan and I make an excuse to go and be out on the street with them. Because I've met the father now, I've met the son, I've had to ask him to pick up his trash that he drops in the driveway and doesn't pick up. I've talked to him politely. When him and his boys stand on the corner, I start sweeping my leaves, and then they eventually leave, because it's not cool to stand on the corner with the lady sweeping her leaves. And I'm not trying to get at them, I'm actually trying to just be there right now. Because the first thing I want to do is build a fence, and build it as tall as I can. Just block it out. But they're still next door to me. I'm still gonna see them on the street. And so when I learned about the mother, and then sometimes I can hear voices, I could hear her yelling at her daughter, who is probably a challenged parent herself, I'm starting to have a lot more empathy. And then like Sarah G's family, he has a teenage brother who's going through stuff. I have a lot of empathy towards parents who have to raise a teenager. I don't have a child. I work with children, I work with teenagers, and I get to send them home. And I have a lot of, right now it's sympathy, I don't know if it's empathy, I don't know, that's a challenging word. But I think it's probably one of the toughest things is to get a teenager through those years. That's when I usually lose them as students, somewhere between 13 and 17, that's when they go off and bleh. But if you can hold on to them during those years, I mean, that's a powerful thing. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I don't know how I'm going to take the bowl of soup over, but I know that I need to reach out to them at some point.
Why?
Because they're my neighbors. I'm not going to try and solve their problems, but I think it's going to actually help just our existence together. And I would think that in Israel, it's just, I mean, it's your neighbors. It just hurts my feelings so much when
What
I
if
think
their
of it.
response is, I don't want your charity?
Well, see, that's why it hasn't happened yet. So I don't quite know how I'm going to get there. But I think that's, and I've been mad at them. So I think that I'm certainly not happy-go-lucky all the time about this. I've been very frustrated. But my response hasn't been to do anything. I haven't called the police on them. I don't want to get that confrontational. I haven't built the fence. I don't want to build the fence to piss them off. So that would only add to the next level of aggression. So
I think you should take the chance and just take the soup or the food over, because that in a way is a metaphor. It has a larger metaphor of you can either stay at your comfort level and do nothing, or do the safe thing to do, which is nothing, and continue where you are, or you can not. I'm saying you as in everybody, myself included, is when you push yourself a little bit more and you try something new, even though it might be uncomfortable. That's when you learn something about yourself mostly, but also about the other person. Because you're pushing your boundaries and you're pushing what you thought you can and cannot do. And a lot of people, I think, in my opinion, have the habit of not thinking, I can do this, I cannot do that. Oh, I can't do this, I cannot, this is what I can do and that's all I can do. And they don't go beyond that line. And therefore they don't learn and they don't grow, and they're always within the same circle.
Some of these stories that we've been hearing going around are basically some of these feelings of empathy seem to bubble up in response to an unexpected behavior that has come from the other end. So your neighbor, to him that was such an unexpected behavior for you to do that. And then, this woman who went to South Africa, this parents to meet the man who killed their daughter, that's an unexpected behavior. And for you to go and bring the soup or whatever it may be would be potentially be an unexpected behavior for your neighbors to think, oh, wow, someone is treating me with some kind of a kindness that is unexpected. And
Time's up.
I know, I went over my time.
Wait a minute.
Will
Whose
it
phone
stop?
is that?
It's Ed's.
It's Bruce's.
hold that thought. He's like,
Family's up.
Stop. It's his phone.
Boy, it's loud.
On mine, I don't have it.
Let her. Let's not lose that.
It's okay.
Libby.
All right, now we can really talk.
Yeah! That was really crap.
That's a bunch
No,
of
but
hooey.
The whole thing like reminds me
Wait,
of.
did you turn it off?
Yeah,
Okay,
did.
wait, let's pick this up again, cause this is really, wow.
All right.
No, wait.
So
Let's let Denise finish.
well, it just reminds me of that whole saying. Like I'm sure people have heard of the saying, "Kill them with kindness." And it's funny because I always, whenever I feel angry at someone for doing something to me, I really try to remember that because I try to channel those negative feelings because I know in the end it's going to have a better outcome if I act kindly as opposed to acting with anger. And I've learned lessons because sometimes I can't help it and then I go the other direction and it's very, very toxic place to be. But when you behave in a way that people are not expecting, that's going towards something kind and something that gets in touch with your emotions, it starts to bring all of, to me that's part of empathy and what empathy is. And when you can surprise people with that, it can change behaviors, whether short term or long term. And people remember it, I think. So.
Prior to empathy, isn't there a reaction first to bring you into the empathy? In other words, like in your case, there was an action, your next door neighbor passed away, and you reacted to that passing, and that made you feel to do something positive, to reciprocate in a positive way towards his loss. That's in essence what you're saying with the basket of food. So you reacted. Of course, it's a positive reaction compared to a negative reaction. You reacted, and well, it became it started with this reacted, then you became sympathetic, and from that sympathy you were so involved emotionally, it became empathetic, because invariably you must have put yourself in his place as well, probably at that time, because you were moved physically and mentally, emotionally. So,
Yeah, Libby and I have been thinking what would it be like if something happened to either of us, because we're not so young anymore. But what you said, Denise, and what you said, really, there's something to that, because also recently I've heard, and it made sense, that this paradox that if we have an enemy and we actually give dignity to that enemy, allow that person to feel more dignity, maybe by listening to them, maybe by going and sympathizing with them, and then empathizing. There's something about this paradox in life that heals the relationship. And I think it is what you said, though nobody said it like you said it, and that is when you do the unexpected. And it makes me think that maybe that's the power in this dialogue, that and the power actually of the oppressed, whoever one sees himself or herself as the oppressed, to go and give dignity to the oppressor as a human being, not necessarily for what they're doing, that this could change the nature of the relationship. And it could actually be the power of the person who feels weak. And what we hear in the room tonight seems to validate that.
I feel like the challenge for all of us now is to be empathetic all the time. One of the things that I've heard tonight is that we sort of pick and choose. If I know enough, I can care about you. If I don't know enough, you're not in my radar. But somehow it feels like we are so far removed from that in the world today, because like you were saying, the motivation is everything, is what's in it for me. But if we could see that what's in it for me that is good should be good for all of us. So I feel like it's a big challenge to not pick and choose, but to shock people by being empathetic all the time and caring about everybody all the time. Yeah, instead of picking and choosing, I feel like we're really being challenged to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more conscious about how we treat everybody and why. And I speak for myself when I say that, because hearing everybody talk tonight, I can feel it's easy to pick and choose and not walk around with that right spirit all the time.
It seems to me that empathy requires a fundamental notion that we're all human,
beings.
Yeah.
that we are all significant human beings, and it goes to what the theme of this group is, that we're trying to make friends out of enemies, and we do that through compassion and empathy and learning. And I don't want to be misunderstood about waiting to get more information. I don't think you need to wait. I think you can start with a decision, like people have said. And I think it is remarkable to me that idea that every person is a valued human being is not a universal one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It isn't.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You're raising your hand, or are you
What's against us is the forces of
You don't raise
evil.
it, no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you raising your
Jump
hand?
in
Oh
there.
yeah, did we just jump in?
Jump in,
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's like,
Hands aren't
teacher.
working tonight.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of everybody has been saying tonight, and I think that people have like really isolated themselves. You know, the way that communities are set up, and unless you're in a big city, I mean specifically like suburbs, I think there's a lot of, you know, racial classes and different, you know, it's very separated, isolated, and so we don't spend a lot of time with a lot of different groups of people. I don't, you know, in this country. For me, my personal experience, I've been part of a music community my whole life, and it's in that, you know, growing up and being around Asians and, you know, Middle Eastern people, everybody is all together in the music world. So I didn't grow up like with an idea of racism. I didn't see that until, you know, in the media is where I really saw it on TV, and then, you know, so I think the fact that I spend a lot of time around all these different people and I get to know them, and they're all musicians, so we have something in common, but I get to understand them a little bit better, and they don't seem scary or anything, and I think then I can be very empathetic towards them. I think that we need to spend time with different groups of people. That's the only way to
You know, that's
understand.
interesting because for me, on that note, I never really saw colors, the different colors, till I came to this country. I mean, in my high school there were black people, but I never really saw them as black, and I never saw the other people as white. And then when I came to this country to go to college, then I started seeing black and white because that's what the society labeled people. And that's when I became aware of race. Before that, all my life, I didn't see any colors. Just, you know, it all just basically depended if you're a good person or not, regardless of your color.
Yeah, we recently facilitated a dialogue in Fresno. In fact, we're making a movie out of it, and it's almost done, called Crossing Lines in Fresno. And there was a young guy there who had grown up in Pakistan. He was American, Caucasian. But he said when he grew up and went to school in Pakistan, he did not experience all this. But when he came back to the United States, he did. And he says now he came to the dialogue because he'd really like to see his culture in Fresno, California, be like it was in Pakistan. So it's the same story.
I'm thinking about your neighbor's story, and I've had a very tough time with a neighbor upstairs, and I don't know, maybe my compassionate self would think, okay, why is this guy so nasty? But I'm not at the point of how I can imagine kindness yet. And he doesn't have a partner to die to facilitate the process. when I was away at a camp. I was away at Tawanga, of all things, at Peacemakers Camp, and my daughter was acting like a teenager and had her friends over, and they made noise. And instead of knocking on the door and asking her to be quiet, he just called the police. And then the second time, she did it again after swearing she would never do it again. And he called. I get home from a cancer retreat, and there's a call. This is Child Protective Services.
Oh, no.
I have a
Wow.
report of an abandoned child. I said, she's 17, she made noise and she annoyed the neighbor. And the woman goes, thank you, case closed. I'm like, but this is the guy when he arrived, I brought him food, I've done it. I was like, and now he's reported everyone in the whole building, so we all, to the fire marshal, and we all had it. Anyway, I'm really struggling. It's easy to say. But when the rubber meets the road, it sure is hard when someone is doing you wrong and your life is already hard.
Yeah.
Finding compassion and trying, I mean, to me, it sounds like I should be curious, like, what is his story that makes him so goddamn nasty, pardon me.
I got a suggestion. Give him the movie Grumpy Old Men.
Anonymous.
Anonymous.
That's a cute one.
You know, I just had another insight here, and that is that maybe what allowed me to go over to our neighbor after his wife had died, because I felt he was more vulnerable, less hostile, more receptive. Maybe it was safer for me. And maybe that's just the sign of another opportunity when somebody else is hurting. You know, if they're an enemy, that's a time to go, if you really want to make the relationship better,
Go
maybe
hurt
it's
'em.
safer and easier than to do it, and it's an opportunity.
I think it's the parallel between what you said, Sergey and Mohammed, the idea of safety and not feeling threatened. So that you're not on the defense and you can just be there. And then Gail also said when you yourself have so much going on in your own life, it's really hard to be out there and take in all the things that are going on in the world. So I think people do select because there's so much grief and stuff in the world at large. Internationally in the nation, that not everybody is going to listen to everyone's individual story, unfortunately. So.
I think empathy is something that is taught, either by the parents or the school, the teacher, and that's one thing I think that's fairly clear, that you learn it somehow. And I think empathy is very closely related to another trait, and that's justice. Being compelled to act justly, like the prophet said, act justly, fairly, justly. And if you have a strong feeling of wanting to be just and fair, then it's not too difficult to be empathetic, because you're open to it then, if you believe in justice. So I think we kind of connect those two traits. And above all, I think it's a wonderful thing when parents can teach their children, or the grandparents can teach grandchildren, compassion. And it's how they talk about other people and about other. I have to say, in all fairness, Leslie and Linda, our two daughters, had many experiences at Camp Swig and with Joan Baez and with Buber and so on, and they're both very empathetic people. Luckily, we have two enormously empathetic, and their children are extremely empathetic. So I think it is taught and passed on in a way.
Question. If you are walking down the street and somebody falls, whether a man or a woman, whatever, and invariably you know they needed help, would you go to their help or not?
You just remind me of something.
Huh?
You remind me of a story that happened in Russia about empathy. This is really something.
Okay, is that empathy, for the person?
So I was studying abroad in Russia.
You what?
I was studying abroad. I was with a host family, and I was studying the language in Russia.
In Russia.
And I was going to my classes in the morning, and I was late, and I was going there, and I saw someone, this woman, just lying on the street, and she looked horrible, and she was just on in this middle aisle that was in the street. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm in this foreign country. I don't even speak the language that well. And I'm like, huh. And so I was like, I'm late to class, and I didn't really know what to do. And I'm like, and I don't even know, what am I? So I just walked past her, and I kept walking. And I stopped, and I said, and this is what happened. My heart did not go out to her. I did not feel like, oh my God. I empathize with you. I just love you dearly. My emotions are overcoming me. All that stopped me was almost kind of like I felt I can't go on to class, knowing that she was lying there, and I chose to rush off to class. I said, I have to stop. My emotions are not in it, but I just have to stop. So I turned back, and I kind of talked to her in Russian, and it was kind of a little messy. And eventually some some ambulance came and just out of the blue and picked her up, and it didn't look like she wanted to go, and it was kind of messy. But I was on the whole way back, I was thinking, I was like, I didn't really empathize with her, but I stopped. I didn't really even help her. I don't know, I just talked with her. I kind of felt like I had to do it, like I'd feel guilty if I didn't, so really why was I doing it? But I did it anyway, and I don't know.
Почему?
Почему? Oh, почему? Потому что я не знаю.
That's rude to
Why do
speak
you
a different
Потому что
language.
мне надо.
Why do you think? What was it in you?
You guys do that all the time.
Because I don't know, because I was because I felt there was an ideal, I guess, that if someone's on the ground, they are more important than because I heard those stories of people who are teaching about the Good Samaritan, these teachers, they all got assigned a class to teach about the Good Samaritan, and this whole study was set up, and 50% and they have someone lying in the hallway. Right, you heard about this? And 50% of the teachers just rushed past them to go and teach their class on the Good Samaritan, who went and stopped and helped. So I was like, it just felt like this is something I believed in, that I held dearly, that you take human beings over anything. And so I did it, but I don't know if I empathize with her.
Well, my question is that empathy then?
Maybe you have to define it for yourself, like Adam says he doesn't know for sure, but he knew it was the right thing to do.
Come on,
I didn't know if it was that.
I think empathy, when you, to me, what I'm hearing is that when you have empathy, you are conscious about something and you see something and you want to do the right thing. Whereas I think with sympathy, and kind of made me think of what you were talking about, you said you were too empathetic and it was almost a problem. I would say that probably you were sympathetic, because my understanding is that if you have sympathy for somebody, you get into their space so much and you feel sorry for them that it causes you to become incapable. Hilda, you, as a social worker, you become incapable of helping somebody clearly if it's sympathy, because you identify with them so much you can't do the right thing. But if you have empathy, you are better able, because you can get into their shoes but not have all these feelings of feeling stuck. You can give good advice or respond in a really productive, creative way. I think that's the difference between sympathy and empathy.
I don't know why you have to separate the emotions. I mean, they're
Well, as social workers, there is a reason, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that's how Libby's supervisor, that's how she evaluated you when you were a social worker, at Mount Zion when we were first married.
Really?
She said you were so sympathetic with everybody.
That I was a
that
disaster.
It was hard to make a really good, sometimes it's hard for you to make a really
Maybe
good
that's
decision.
why I know that, and the meaning then.
Like when you took all the stray dogs and cats in at your house and took them to the veterinarian.
Wanted to adopt all the abused children.
Judy, could
Yeah,
you
that's-
talk more
that's-
about what you meant? You said that it was a problem for you. Can you just say a little more
Well,
about that?
it was a bit paralyzing. But it seemed to me, in my mind, I was putting myself, or I was taking on emotions of other people
Yeah.
that were so hurt. And I mean, I grew up in a home that I didn't really have a lot of models of taking action to help people. So I was taking in a lot of information, the hurts that I could see in other people or other groups of people, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to manifest some positive action.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've gotten much better at that and as an adult, but I think that, you know, and I don't know where it came from, this way that if I see someone hurting or, you know, that I take it in somehow. But, you know, that you were saying earlier you had more struggles with empathizing with Jewish people, and I think, I mean, that's, I mean, I can have so much compassion for both peoples in the Middle East and all peoples in conflict. I don't know. And it just seems to me to make the point of, and the shooting you were talking about earlier, the Palestinian that was shot by a Palestinian who was mistaken for a Jew, just points out how ridiculous the whole thing is.
Yeah.
I mean, that it's not an answer to anything. It doesn't move us forward or in any way or resolve any problems. It just continues the animosity and whatever. I don't know if that was at all elucidating.
I think what Judy is saying is we have to understand we live in a crazy world. The world is not sane. I don't know if it ever was, but it certainly is not now. Israelis are not acting in their own best interests, neither are Palestinians. Americans are not acting in their own best interests. We're going through a period now, like this man who drove from San Francisco to the Pentagon and started shooting at the Pentagon, and of course they killed him. I mean, what else could they do? But it's insane. It just isn't. The pilot who the air controller who lets his child control an airplane. I don't know if you saw that. It's insane. It's out of 300 people in a
Let's
plane.
take your son to work day, you know, I understand that.
I mean, come on. So you have to understand. I deal with this every day, twice a day, trying to explain what's going on in the world to people who want to know. And the reality is, it doesn't make any sense. It does not make sense. Obama doesn't make sense. The Republicans don't make sense. Individually, they're probably fairly rational people, but in their behavior, there's a lot of irrational behavior. Everybody. So you have to understand, if you want empathy, we can do it on an individual basis, thank God. We can be real human beings, but don't expect the world to sign on.
So what you're saying now, the world as a whole, it's not empathetic towards each other.
No, not at all.
That's not
Look
the
at China, look at Russia.
So we have to take it on the individual basis.
That's
We
right.
go back to the citizens, like Len's favorite word. We are the citizens.
We are the
and
world.
we are the one in parallel to the government.
Right.
Right.
Which I agree with you. I mean, I hate to say it, to admit it. I agree with you.
Prejudice. You know,
In fact, you know what? Wait. I have an article. It's a bit long one though, but let me read it for you. And let me know if you know who said it. I think it applies to you very well. I like to believe that people in the long run are going to do more to promote peace than our government. Indeed, I think that people want peace so much that one of these days government had better get out of the way and let them have it. Who said it?
Eisenhower.
You're right.
Ike.
Ike.
I like Eisenhower.
Imagine that goes 65 years ago, it's
Yeah.
been said. And I can't agree with you more.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's beautiful.
You know, also there's something about this, talking about the difference between sympathy and empathy that's really important. Because I think sometimes we get very sympathetic with one side or the other. And sometimes it's our own people, sometimes it's the other side. But I know from being a pediatric dentist that if you're too sympathetic, because I had, nurses who would come in and assist me with children, and they were too sympathetic. Now, I was empathetic, but if you're too sympathetic, you can't make good decisions for people. I mean, you can't just moan and groan and afraid you're going to hurt somebody if in the long run you're going to heal them. And I think that's part of what's going on in this war, in these wars too, is that we are too sympathetic toward one side or the other, and we're not helping our own people or the other people. And so to discern between empathy and sympathy, I think, as you brought up, Libby, is very important as a physician or a healer of relationships.
I just want to, something that just kind of came into my mind about this. I also feel like, and I mean, I wouldn't really know what this is like, but when people are in like a survival mode, when you just are trying to live to make it, what am I going to eat, what am I going to drink, is my family going to be killed, that goes to like the primitive part of your brain where the rest of your brain is not engaged in wondering how do I feel and how does my neighbor feel. And that's almost like a luxury to have those kind of feelings and to be able to empathize with your neighbor and this and that. When you feel happy and you feel safe and you don't have to worry about the basics of survival, you can start reaching out and making connections. But, and we all have that luxury, and unfortunately most of the world does not have this luxury on a day-to-day basis. There's, poor people in third world countries and people are just trying to survive, and I think those kind of things are just not even on people's radar who are going through those things. So, when we talk about like countries as a whole, empathetic, and why is the world like this, I think a lot of it has to do with, some of it has to do, I think, with those kind of aspects where people are just trying to make it and to live, and you don't have any capacity to feel empathy or sympathy or compassion for other people when you really want to figure out how you're going to feed your kids, or, are you going to live to see the next week? It just made me think about that, what you were saying, Eric. And,
You're absolutely right.
yeah.
That's a brilliant statement you just made.
Yes, definitely.
But I have to say, I have heard stories of communities of people where they have very little. Very
Yes.
little.
Yes.
And they're not worried about if they're gonna have water to drink or rice on the table, but very little compared to what we have. And they share what they have with their whole community. The neighbors all care for each other, look out for each other. And I think we do a far worse job doing it because we feel we have so much to lose. And those people who have next to nothing don't have anything to lose. So what they have to sustain and to keep is their relationships and feeling supported with each other. So I think it's both and. I think
Sure.
there are people
Yeah.
who are so far beyond being able to even think about that. But I think there are a lot of people who have next to nothing who really take care of each other and are very empathetic with their whole circle, their whole community. And that's why Americans, I mean, we are always looking out for if we're gonna get all of our oil and all the resources that we want, and we have a lot to lose, and so we really hang on, and we don't have empathy for people who can't help us and keep us, giving us what we want.
That's what I was actually talking to Edwin when we were talking at the table. And I was gonna say kind of like the opposite of what Denise is saying, that I think this particular society, the American society, is more selfish. And even though we have so much, that other societies who are poor by comparison will invite a stranger in and offer him or her hospitality and food and all of that. And even though they have so much less to share and so much less wealth, but they're more open and more generous and more compassionate and have more empathy and feelings toward their neighbors and their society and their countrymen and even strangers than we do here, because the nature of this society is every person is, as an individual, is just so focused on themselves. Right. And it's me, and what can I get for myself today?
Exactly.
So.
What if we take the last few minutes that we have, it's only about 7, and just go around the circle, and everybody doesn't have to, but it would be nice, and just say, like, what are one or two elements, what are one or two memories that we'll take home from tonight about sympathy and empathy and dignity and opportunity and all that we've talked about. So let's just, some essence.
What I like to say, if we all remind ourselves that we are all humans and we are all equal towards each other, and then empathy comes naturally. If I treat you like I like you to treat me, and that's what it's all about. Treat me as a human being and I'll treat you as such. And I don't step on your toe and you don't step on my toe. But in fact, try to promote each other's welfare. That's what's important. That's what makes us human, and that's what separates us from the other animal kingdom.
Can I tell a story? That some of the things, both your responses about what happens when I think human beings realize that their survival is foundationally based on other human beings' survival. This Vietnam War vet came to my college and was talking about how when he was in battle, of course, well, they didn't really care about the survival of the Vietnamese, they wanted them dead. Mm-hmm. But their comrades, right, they were like brothers. Mm-hmm. And he says when the battle was over and they went back to their camp, suddenly everyone started separating based on college education or high school education, on race, on class. And so I thought, wow, because I think that like almost brings up a different point. That almost the luxury of prejudice. The luxury to be like, I don't actually need you. I'm going to hate you and kill you. I don't know.
Interesting. Wow.
We're just going around. I guess what I'll take from this meeting tonight on empathy is I'm going to try to work at being like when I come across somebody in my life that upsets me or I don't agree with them, I'm going to try to do maybe I think you might have said it, killing with kindness, kind of start from there, and then maybe that'll get me in more on the inside with them and be able to understand and get to that empathetic level. gonna work at it. Something to work at.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of like the idea tonight of having this word that we're kind of revolving around in a way to focus. But so I kind of like that. And what I'll take away is I didn't really share my personal empathy stories, but it certainly has made me think about them a little bit more. And because I think I do tend to feel a little bit helpless sometimes when I feel empathy, and to maybe think more about taking that feeling of helplessness and going beyond that, doing something about it.
I think that hearing each other's stories is just really powerful. And I sometimes try to retell what goes on in here to my friends, and I've had people who have wanted to come and join the group, and I kind of just wish that I could share it more. I mean, just to take, you know, a good 10-minute nugget right here and share it with people, because it's changed me. It's changed the way I listen to people, and it's changed the way I've wanted to, you know, can grow as a person, and you guys have taught me a lot. So, and I'm looking forward to reading that book too. So thank you.
I guess I come away with this particular stories that people shared, the narratives, because they're really real. So they have a resonation that'll always stay with me. I think Denise's thing about the kindness that Sergio also said was really very powerful. And the idea of sympathy and empathy and the right balance. Always trying to find the right balance so that you really are there for the person and you're not depleting yourself, because then you're not good for anybody. So that kind of balance.
I was really moved by what you said, Muhammad. I was very moved by what Muhammad said. I think you said some very profound things, and I like the working definition that you said empathy is, you think of as a productive discussion. I really like that. And the idea of justice being connected to empathy, I think, is also very profound. And I hearing what you just said, Adam, too, about having the luxury of prejudice or making no separation. That was an interesting way of looking at that. I'm looking forward to kind of thinking about that more.
I guess I would say that one of the things I'm taking away from tonight and hearing the stories is that having empathy is a choice. And it's something that I can choose to use every day, and like with our neighbor, I can see that it really does make a difference. So that's what I would say.
For me, I'm more believer now in empathy. As you said, empathy is a choice, and also peace is a choice. And for me, empathy is peace.
I'll just say something. I've been quiet here.
You know, why don't you come and get in the camera, sit where I am, and you talk, get your focus there, and I'm going to ask you a question when you sit in the chair.
Okay.
Wait, want me to say that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, he was just shifting his cameras, but okay.
Okay. Great. I'm just doing it last.
Get away with that.
Does he need makeup?
Action. Thought you could get away
Need
with
more
that.
lighting on him.
Yeah, look how dark he
This is the bluebirds reel at the end of the tape.
What do you take home?
So I went to the Israeli embassy trying to get some sympathy or empathy. No, I'm just. No, I'll defer to Eric. I said enough. I have nothing more to add.
I'm glad to have had the privilege of spending another couple of hours in an island of sanity.
classical
I'll buy that.
FM station.
And I'll join you in that. And I think most of us, when we're in a position where we do empathize with someone, I think most of us might think of this evening in this group and refer back to some things that we heard tonight.
I was very touched with what you were talking about, you and your mother relationship, and how you learn how to, or you force yourself how to forgive her for what you thought she wasn't doing right. And then I was very touched.
Yeah, I'll take away a couple of things that people have said. Mohammed made me think about the power of listening and just the feeling that you will be heard and that someone wants to hear you and how important that can be. And yeah, your stories, I love it because Len also often makes the stories very personal and brings it down to earth. And the story about the mother, about his mother and shifting frames and the work to shift into a different frame. And you talked about that a little bit too, Ellen, of trying to shift the frame with your neighbor and how we make those choices, but how it really isn't easy. It's easy to talk about it in an abstract way, but it's really hard to do it. And I appreciate hearing the struggles and the struggle you faced and people's process of this hard work. But wow, what good work.
Спасибо.
Пожалуйста.
Well, for sure, the most important dramatic thing I'm going to take home from tonight is about the unexpected. That to do the unexpected has great power. And the unexpected could be an act of incredible goodwill and spirit from somebody who has traditionally punished or oppressed a person or a people. And the unexpected could be the same act from the person who has been received punitive treatment, who has been treated incredibly badly. So to do the unexpected has huge power, and thank you for that, Denise.
So now you're gonna.
So why don't you come over here and we'll
Get up
ask
there,
you.
John, sit down. You know that song?
Wrap it up.
So Ed, when you came here to film tonight about empathy and human activities together, and so what has it been like for you to be here in the midst of these Jews and Palestinians, men and women across generations? What has it been like you to hear these stories and to hear these insights about real life?
Well, I would like to add one other part to the question, because you've interviewed and met with a lot of people about this, so I wondered too if you heard anything new tonight.
Well, for me, it's more the process, kind of the exploration, kind of a mutual exploration. And I think this is kind of what should happen, like thousands of these kind of gatherings should be all around the country, kind of doing this exploration together. Because it's not like we kind of take the word empathy and then in a 2-hour session we come up with some kind of a conclusion. It's like this ongoing personal growth that kind of happens, and for me it's like creating a culture of empathy. You know, how do we go about creating a culture of empathy? And I think part of it is just getting together and talking like this and kind of exploring the terms and what was the other question in terms of?
Well, after you've just heard so many people and you've interviewed so many people, I just wondered if anything new kind of came out tonight.
Well, I've heard a lot, like the thing about the surprise part. You know, it's like there's something about if you can follow your own spontaneity. It's also within myself, I find, when I'm spontaneous and can just say what's kind of coming to me, that actually creates a space for a deeper sense of empathy. That going into myself and sharing more about myself creates that empathy, and that's something I really love, is that spontaneity. I don't know how to do it reliably, but every now and then, I know, but every now and then I hit it, and when I do it feels really good.
Well, you're pretty spontaneous right now. Why is that? What about tonight touches you? And
well, this is my theme. I've been exploring this for the last year almost. So, it's like I've heard a lot of kind of what's going on here, and like this question about sympathy and empathy, and it's really good to hear it in this kind of a context, because I say, great, there's a market for this. It's like people really need to understand the differences and kind of be able to articulate the differences, and need those stories, to kind of help that personal growth.
So what's another question people would ask?
Oh, this is great.
Edwin.
How did you get into doing this particular theme?
Well, I always like to explore themes kind of thematically, and there's a long history of it. Like after I finished high school, I went traveling around the world for 10 years. And I met a friend that I met just a couple of months after I started traveling, and he had this approach that he would always take a theme and just explore it to death, for 6 months or something. And when we get together, I'd say, "What's the theme, Harold?" Because I knew he was always working on something, and I thought, hey, that's a pretty cool way of kind of deep digging into reality. And so I kind of took that on, and then what kind of got me into empathy was actually Obama, because he talks about it all the time. I've kind of researched his speeches, and he's mentioned it in speeches and interviews about 60 times, saying the country has an empathy deficit. And he actually ran on, I would say, the core value he ran on was empathy. And most people aren't really aware of that.
And what is the power of film to help all this?
Well, it's the way of spreading those experiences, like those stories here that thousands or millions of people can kind of share in those experiences. And next week is the Republican GOP convention in Santa Clara, the state convention. So I'm going there for 3 days to interview conservatives. And libertarians and Republicans. Like, what is that view of empathy, and then kind of get a dialogue going through film, because you can kind of carry that dialogue through film between different people. You don't even have to be in the same room. You can interview them here, interview them there, and put it together, and you kind of create this dialogue, kind of what we're doing here. So film can be like an extension of this dialogue.
Do you hope to make a film that will be shown, say, on KQED? What's your goal with all this?
Kind of my ideal, this is my ideal, would be kind of like the Ken Burns type film, like a 12-hour documentary, in 6 parts. It's like the definitive piece on empathy. Ken Burns does the Civil War, like everything you ever want to know about the Civil War, or about baseball, jazz,
national parks.
Yeah, and so empathy would be kind of something I would like to do, ideally.
Are you working on, do you have a grant from a foundation?
I'm doing it, I'm spending my inheritance right now, so.
You're doing it all by yourself?
Yeah, just on my own. So trying to kind of get a ball rolling to, do it step by step, and then, get funding as I go along and get people kind of interested in it. So.
I don't know how much it showed tonight, but it's just my wish that you get a sense that in this group listening to each other's stories, I think, has been very transforming. And you never know when it's going to happen. Like, you know, you come to the meeting, you never know when someone's story or someone's grief or sometimes it'll be catalyzed by events like when Gaza was so under siege.
You felt
group
transformed through this process.
Group has taught me, this group in part I'm newer in this group because I'm adopted temporarily until I go home to San Francisco. But I've learned so much from people here who have really changed me. And watching them, watching each other listen to, anyway, I don't know if you can see that.
I see it. I feel it as you speak. Yes.
It's what an amazing group of people who have taken this leap of faith to listen to each other.
Invite us to cons when you go.
Yeah, okay. That would be great.
Thank you
Yes,
for
this was
being
very fun.
interested and generating such a really important topic.
Yeah, thanks for doing this little interview with me. I'm always behind the camera, so this was a lot of fun.
So you can put yourself in it.
Okay.
Produce, acted,
Record.
by
And I think we all signed a paper, right? Everybody signed a release?
Yeah, I
Okay.
said, don't put my name in the.
Okay, everybody go enjoy some more food. There's a lot of food left on that table.
Adam's had
I
his
want
dinner.
coffee.
I never told you
Finish.
that. You know,
Dude, I
Ben.
thought you were gonna drink it.
working online.
Something passion.
Oh, yeah?
You became cranberry boys.
Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.